Hey there, my friends, and welcome into Forte Catholic's Advent Event. We hope that you have had a blessed Advent so far and are ready for Christmas in less than a week now. We're all very excited here. So Allison Sullivan and I teamed up to share this with you to hopefully give you that last little jolt of Advent, of hope and waiting and faith and joy as we head into the Christmas season here in just a few days. So today, I'm going to be sharing some music. Allison's going to be sharing a message about those themes of Advent. We hope that you enjoy it. Oh come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Come thou day spring, come and cheer our spirits by thine advent here. Disperse the gloomy clouds of night, and test our shadows put to flight. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Oh, rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel.
Here we are at Advent. I am going to be frank that when it came time to sit and write about the traditional weekly Advent themes, hope, peace, joy, and love, as I do each year, the last couple of years, I haven't had very much to say. These have been interesting times, to say the least. Our family has been through a lot, some big changes. We've spent a lot of time in doctors' offices. And I'm a little more tired than usual, as I'm sure are most of you. So these familiar words, they have felt complicated for me. But I stumbled upon something that felt like divine timing, and it was this. You might know that the Carmelite nuns, Saint Therese of Lisieux and Teresa of Avila, are Carmelites. And they're an ancient order whose spiritual focus is on contemplation as prayer and community and service. And the Carmelites, they focus their Advent on something just a little bit different. Their themes are waiting, accepting, journeying, and birthing. And when I read that, I felt this burden lift because I felt like those words had room for me this Advent as I prepare Him room. Advent. It's the church's way of observing and remembering and marking the truth that God came to be with us once. He is still with us now, and He is coming again to set all things right. When I was a kid, I lived in this pretty idyllic little neighborhood where there were actual Christmas carolers. And I couldn't read, so I only sang the ones about Santa, the few lines of Silent Night that I knew. But I won't forget standing there in the cold and hearing grown-ups sing this phrase, something about a stump of Jesse. There was nothing that sounded merry or bright about a stump of Jesse. What on earth? But a shoot. It will come from the stump of Jesse. And because of the mood that I've been in lately, I leaned into that confusion and went through the scriptures anew. So this from Isaiah, the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, He will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness, he will judge the needy. With justice, he will give decisions for the poor of the earth, and the wolf will live with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the goat, and the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, and the young will lie down together. The lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. In that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the people. The nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious. Every time that's read, every year, I feel this mix of confusion and anxiety and discouragement and maybe even a little irritable. It all just seems so unsafe. Stump of Jesse, children and snakes, lambs and lions, glorious, you say, Isaiah? Because it sounds like a disaster to me. I must have a few things to learn. And I did. I would love to take you through some of the things that God has pointed out to me as I have committed to this passage, trying to understand it anew. First, the stump of Jesse. Jesse is the father of King David. And I know that King David is a very significant figure because the gospel goes very much out of its way in great detail to state that Jesus is in the family line of King David, and therefore he is a descendant of Jesse. Okay, so these ancient and mysterious words, they matter. We're talking about Jesus, but we can get to that in a second. So these words, they take on a lot of significance when we understand the setting of them. The image of this tree stump, that doesn't appear out of nowhere because the previous chapter, the book of Isaiah, the one that we don't read as often, that's chapter 10, it contains a lot of angry words that were spoken on God's behalf by Isaiah. And so this prophet, he is expressing divine anger. And it's directed in part to the Assyrian people for their military aggression, but also in large part to the people of Israel and Judah. They're condemned for all sorts of things, but most notably, they are condemned by the prophet for depriving the poor, withholding justice, making widows their prey, and robbing the fatherless, it says. So the people are told that these failures, they have consequences, and that because of their failures, terrible times are coming. And they are told that nothing will remain but to cringe among the captives or fall among the slain, it says. Why don't we read that chapter more often as Christmas arrives? But then in chapter 10, it says this, it ends with the prophet specifically saying that God is going to cut down all the trees. The lofty trees, it says, will be felled and the tall ones will be brought low. That's what it says, gone. So this is why we're talking about a stump. This is the stump because Isaiah says that God got mad. Divine anger. He took action in response to this disobedience and this violence and this greed and corruption. And in my life, I don't know about you, but I have certainly over-focused on this idea of an angry God. I've spent a long time staring at a stump, if you will, without reading on. And it is very important to point out that after chapter 10, there is a chapter 11. So yes, God mowed down all of the trees. That happened. He did that. There was despair. But listen, hope is coming. In chapter 10, we are told of him acting on his anger because kings of Israel and Judah had been appointed with great expectation. But they had failed to lead the people in the ways of peace and justice and compassion as God had commanded them to do. And so the dreams were dead and the hope was gone. And after he was finished, the only thing left were stumps of what once had been. And so in this setting, just when things appear hopeless and the future looks very, very bleak, the prophet promises that God will one day send a leader who will rule with justice and mercy. And haven't we all been there? Haven't we been in the middle of chapter 10? despair, desolation, hopelessness. That's okay, because God is in the business of making something out of nothing. When all we see are stumps, God sees opportunity because it is desperation that can so often best showcase his work. Our God is good. Our God is kind. Our God is graceful. And he has gone to very, very great lengths to rectify what has been ruined. How do we know? Because of chapter 11. We have to keep reading. Chapter 11, it starts out telling us that God sent a sprout. It was just a sprout. It wasn't a magnificent oak. It wasn't a towering evergreen. It wasn't a blooming mimosa. It wasn't a regal redwood. It was just a sprout, a bud, it says. And this is Jesus. The time between chapter 10 and 11, this is Advent. We're waiting, and we're hopeful. And maybe we're staring at a bunch of stumps, but we know that a sprout is on its way. And this sprout, it promises us Jesus. And this is just how Jesus came to us. There was no pomp. There was no circumstance. He was a king, and yet he just became one of us in our most fragile form, a newborn baby, a bud. All was gone, but there it was, a thrill of hope. In chapter 10, all the stumps, that's why Jesus came. That's why Jesus died, to repair what we have messed up. And if God had just exclusively allowed his just side of his nature to rule, the side that mows down trees, then we would have had to die for our sin. Chapter 10, that would have been fair, but his love didn't allow for that, chapter 11. And so it's on the cross, it's in this coming and going and coming again of Jesus that we find the complete and perfectly balanced expression of both attributes, chapter 10 and chapter 11, boundless love shown and infinite justice satisfied. Jesus, the cross. God sent Jesus to be everything that we couldn't be. Those corrupt leaders, those fallen leaders, we have a just and righteous leader. Jesus walked down from heaven, and he has involved himself in our sinful lives in the most intimate of ways. His hands dirty and his heart broken, Jesus took it all on. He braved our sin, and he paid the price. And because of that, God's great holiness can only be rivaled by his great love. Jesus turned everything upside down. He confounded every notion we had. We might expect God to come to earth in some golden chariot, or led by white steeds, or surrounded by armies of blazing angels, but he was born as a baby to two terrified teenagers on the run with an animal trough for his first bed. He came as the least of us, not in a raging whirlwind or a devouring fire. He shrank down so very, very small. And juxtaposed with a God who takes a world down to stumps, we see a God who came to us in the most extreme example of humility, that the people of his day called it backwards. He loved with such controversial, counterintuitive love that people literally couldn't understand it. It was so selfless, so great, so easy that they rejected it. So this opposite, the opposite of what they thought they might hear, completely backwards. Jesus' way, it might have been more confounding than relieving. What kind of God are you? Can we get back to, I don't know, this person who's come to earth in a golden chariot, led by white steeds, surrounded by armies of blazing angels? Can we get back to that? Because that's how I think I'll recognize you better. That's what I had in mind. But what was happening all around them was love, and it was mercy, and their own expectations. The people of Jesus's day, their own expectations of what love looked like, it was ruining what love actually looked like. It was ruining what they thought freedom should look like. The ways that they had become accustomed to their own culture instead of a heavenly kingdom, those things blinded them to the truth, because the truth seemed backwards. The real kingdom, not this one that we're passing through, but the real kingdom, it hangs its faith on a crucified Messiah sent to save people who saw him as a contradiction in terms. Because the way they saw it, if Jesus was Lord, then he couldn't be crucified. And if Jesus was crucified, then he couldn't be Lord, because that would be ludicrous. But you want to know what sounds ludicrous to me? You want to know what sounds backwards to me? Lions and lambs, babies and snakes. And so this passage in Isaiah, this prophecy, it made me question, who's backwards? Is it me or is it God? Is it our culture or is it his kingdom? In my confusion, in my alarm, my irritability when I read those verses, these emotions, what if it's God's loving indicator that I have been brainwashed by a culture that runs completely counter to the one that he will set up? This passage has led me to explore my worldly ways and to lament on how my faith life tends to sprint alongside our culture, keeping up just fine. When really, I'm wondering if I shouldn't be taking the world head on, traveling the opposite direction. The rest of the world wondering where I'm headed to on such mission. Because all of the sudden, something more unrecognizable, it feels a little more holy lately. I've been convicted. Not condemned, but convicted. God's not in the business of shame, but he is absolutely in the business of sanctification, and I have been convicted. How often am I ready to go to battle against every evil except my own? My one true goal to just stay the same, never really desiring to be made new. How often do my own desires to be loved instead of to love keep me from bearing fruit? What sanctification am I missing out on when my friendship's only real talent is conversation, and my hurt feelings, they always give me permission to walk away? When I never even consider laying down my life. As a product of our culture and not of his kingdom, yes, I might occasionally work to acknowledge myself, but I never come anywhere close to dying to myself. And there is simply nothing head-scratching about the rules of this earthly kingdom because it all makes perfect sense. But the Holy Spirit that is alive and well inside of us, it should make us look different. The Spirit in us should make the world wonder about our sanity, always doing things inside out and upside down. Our faith hinges on ludicrous, after all. We have important work to do. And the world needs Jesus. The world needs to know about chapter 11. They need their shame taken and their hearts healed and their wounds bound. They need a reason for living and a promise in dying and a seat at his heavenly table because the world needs Jesus. And running alongside our culture and doing the things that make the most sense, well, I'm not sure that that's how we're going to set the world ablaze. I was listening to this Christian author give a talk about a trilogy that he had written, and while writing, while creating, he fell very deeply in love with his main character. So many hours of thought went into the formation of what he clearly saw as a masterpiece, a work of art. He loved him. And he poured himself into him. And he knew exactly who he wanted this character to be by the time the trilogy was over. He knew exactly where he wanted him to be. But to get him there, he had to go through a lot. He had to mow him down. He had to almost kill him. He had to take him to his very furthest edge, and then he had to sink him to his deepest low, and then he had to break him into a million tiny pieces because it was only in building him back up. It was only in leading him to the edge to just snap him right back in. It was only in putting him back together that this character could truly shine with exactly who it was the author intended him to be. He did. He had to almost kill him, but it was desperation that best showcased the author's work. If any of us are worshiping in this season of Advent with a sense of failure, or if our dreams appear to have disintegrated, or if our hopes have faded, or if we're lonely, if we're tired of repeated mistakes, if our bills are high, and our self-esteem is low, and our relationships are difficult, and our health is poor, if all in all we feel a little beat up, this is the story for us, because we don't stop at chapter 10. There's 11. And what might start out as incredibly depressing image of stumps of trees, it turns into a symbol of hope, and we are waiting. Can we prepare him room while we wait? This is the story of what God does. This is the story of who he is. This stump of Jesse, it tells us a story about the resilience of hope and the creativity of the Spirit and the coming of Christ in our midst. The goodness of God and the promise of God are much more resilient than we might imagine. And a shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of its roots. I'm praying for all of us as we journey on in Advent, and praying for us a thrill of hope.
Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, down yon virgin mother and child, holy infant, so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace. Silent night, holy night, Son of God, love's pure light, radiant beams from thy holy face, with the dawn of redeeming grace. Jesus, Lord, at thy birth, Jesus, Lord, at thy birth. From all of us here at Forte Catholic, we hope that you have a blessed rest of your Advent and a very Merry Christmas. We love you guys, and we'll see you soon.